deep in a Spanish cave, researchers made a discovery that would forever change our understanding of human nature. A skull from nearly 500,000 years ago, with two perfectly matched holes punched through its cranium. This wasn't a natural death. This wasn't an accident. This was something far more disturbing. The evidence pointed to only one conclusion: the oldest murder in human history. Long before our species even existed, our ancient relatives were already killing each other. But this grim discovery is just the beginning of a journey into the darkest corners of our prehistoric past, where the remains of our ancestors tell stories more horrifying than any modern crime scene. Stories that science is only now beginning to unravel. These aren't just fossils. They're ancient cold cases revealing how our earliest relatives lived, suffered, and died in ways that modern humans can scarcely imagine. For 2.8 million years, at least 14 different human species have walked this earth. We Homo sapiens are merely the last survivors, newcomers, who've been here just 300,000 years. Every other human species has vanished, leaving behind only fragments of bone that occasionally surface to tell their stories. And what stories they tell. The 430,000-year-old skull, found in Spain's Cima de los Huesos cave, belonged to a Homo heidelbergensis individual, one of our direct ancestors. Scientists initially suspected the holes might have come from a fall onto sharp rocks, but the identical, perfectly matched punctures told a different story. After ruling out animal attacks, no known predator in prehistoric Spain left wounds like these. The only explanation that fit was deliberate violence. The marks matched exactly what we see from stone axe impacts, a weapon wielded by fellow humans. This wasn't just any murder. It was premeditated, requiring strength and precision. The cave where this individual was found contained thousands of other human bones, suggesting this was perhaps the world's first designated burial site, a place where bodies were deliberately deposited after death. Some researchers believe this fatal confrontation may have been over resources or territory, evidence that lethal competition has shadowed our lineage from the very beginning. But while being struck down by your own kind might seem terrible, other prehistoric humans suffered fates that are almost impossible to comprehend. The Cima de los Huesos site, literally pit of bones, represents one of the most extraordinary fossil collections ever discovered, located deep within Spain's Atapuerca mountain range. This chamber lies at the bottom of a 43-foot vertical shaft that acted as a natural trap for thousands of years. Alongside our murder victim, researchers have recovered over 6,500 fossils, representing at least 28 different individuals, all belonging to the Homo heidelbergensis species. What makes this collection so remarkable isn't just its size, but its composition. The remains are predominantly young adults in their prime, with few children or elderly individuals. This demographic profile defies natural mortality patterns, raising disturbing questions about how these bodies accumulated. Were they victims of periodic violence, ritual sacrifices, or deliberate burials? The stone axe murder provides a chilling clue. Forensic analysis of the two penetrating wounds reveals they were delivered from the same angle, with identical force, suggesting the victim was either restrained or incapacitated during the attack. Even more disturbing, microscopic examination shows no signs of healing around the wound edges, meaning death was immediate. This wasn't just violence, it was execution, and it happened nearly 300,000 years before our species even evolved. The implications are profound. The capacity for calculated lethal violence doesn't belong exclusively to Homo sapiens. It runs much deeper in our evolutionary history, perhaps emerging alongside the complex social structures that ultimately gave rise to human civilization itself. What drives one human to deliberately end the life of another? The answer, it seems, predates humanity itself. Imagine being barely 4 feet tall in a world of giants. This was the reality for Homo habilis, one of our earliest ancestors who lived in East Africa nearly 2 million years ago. One individual, known simply as O7, experienced perhaps the most nightmarish death imaginable, a tag-team attack by two different apex predators. The evidence is written in his bones, massive puncture marks on his left leg where flesh was completely torn away, consistent with the bite of Crocodilus thorbjornarsoni, the largest true crocodile that ever lived. This monster stretched 25 feet long and weighed over 2 tons. But somehow, that wasn't the end of O7's ordeal. His skull bears deep grooves in the parietal bone at the back of his head. Marks that match perfectly with the hunting strategy of large felines, based on the pattern of injuries. Paleontologists believe O7 may have been attacked at a water source by the crocodile, managed to partially escape, then was ambushed from behind by a leopard or similar big cat. Neither wound shows any signs of healing, meaning he died quickly. Modern observations confirm that crocodiles and big cats sometimes fight over prey even today, but imagine facing prehistoric versions of both predators simultaneously. This extraordinary fossil represents one of the rarest cases known, a prehistoric human who fell victim to two different predator species in the same attack. A vivid reminder that for much of our evolutionary history, humans weren't hunters, we were the hunted. The landscape where O7 met his violent end was the Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, a place paleontologists call the cradle of mankind. 2 million years ago, this region was a lush wetland surrounding an alkaline lake, teeming with both life and danger. The waterways that sustained human populations also harbored prehistoric crocodiles that had evolved specialized hunting techniques for capturing terrestrial prey. Unlike modern crocodiles that perform the infamous death roll to dismember victims, Crocodilus thorbjornarsoni appears to have employed a grab and tear strategy, seizing limbs and violently wrenching them to disable prey. The leg injuries on O7 show this exact pattern: massive punctures from initial contact, followed by significant tearing damage where flesh was ripped away. What makes this attack particularly fascinating to scientists is what it tells us about human vulnerability during this period. Despite having rudimentary stone tools and emerging cognitive abilities, Homo habilis remained firmly embedded in the prey spectrum of multiple predators. Their small stature, typically under 4'3" tall and rarely exceeding 70 pounds, meant even juvenile predators could view them as potential meals. Isotope analysis of O7's tooth enamel reveals a diet heavily dependent on water-edge vegetation, forcing regular visits to the most dangerous zones in the landscape. This ecological trap, needing to access water while avoiding water-based predators, represents one of the fundamental survival challenges that shaped human evolution. Some researchers theorize that the constant threat of predation may have accelerated the development of social bonds, communication, and cooperative defense strategies that would eventually define our species. In this light, O7's tragic end might represent more than just an individual tragedy. It embodies an evolutionary pressure that helped forge humanity itself. Not all prehistoric deaths were violent. Some were slow, painful, and completely avoidable by modern standards. In 1974, scientists in Kenya unearthed a 1.7 million year old partial skeleton of a female Homo erectus, catalogued as KNMA1808. Her bones told a story of prolonged suffering. Abnormal growth patterns covered her skeleton, along with evidence of massive flunctum bleeding, yet strangely, no wounds were present. The mystery deepened until researchers recognized the telltale signs of hypervitaminosis, a vitamin, a toxicity. This Homo erectus woman had slowly poisoned herself, becoming the oldest documented case of this condition in human history. Her bones revealed she suffered chronically before finally succumbing to the disease. In life, she would have experienced debilitating weakness, blinding headaches, and skin that literally sloughed off her body. Her hair and teeth would have fallen out, and agonizing joint pain would have made even basic movement excruciating, evidenced by the severe pathological bone growth concentrated in her limbs. But how did a prehistoric human consume enough vitamin A to reach toxic levels? The answer lies in her diet. Carnivore liver. This organ can store extraordinary amounts of vitamin A. A polar bear's liver contains enough to provide a human with 150 years worth of this vitamin. Without knowledge of this danger, our ancient relative likely consumed these nutritious organs regularly, unknowingly poisoning herself with each meal. A death that modern medicine could easily prevent. But 1.7 million years ago was a mysterious, unstoppable deterioration. The case of KNMO 1808 provides a remarkable window into both prehistoric diet and social structure. Microscopic examination of her bone lesions reveals that she survived with this condition for weeks, possibly months, far longer than an individual could manage alone in a predator-rich environment. This suggests she received care from group members who provided food, water, and protection during her progressive decline. Such behavior represents one of the earliest documented cases of compassionate care in human evolution, a hallmark trait that would eventually distinguish our lineage. But her case also illuminates the nutritional challenges facing early humans. The transition to meat consumption represented a crucial evolutionary adaptation, providing dense calories and essential nutrients that fueled brain growth. However, this dietary shift came with unfamiliar risks. Unlike plant toxins, which often produce immediate, obvious symptoms, vitamin A accumulates gradually in the body, making cause and effect connections nearly impossible for prehistoric minds to discern. Recent experimental archaeology has demonstrated that a sustained diet, including just 100 to 200 grams of carnivore liver daily, would produce the exact pathology seen in KNM 1808's remains within 3 to 4 months. Isotope analysis of her tooth enamel suggests she had recently migrated from a different region, raising the possibility that environmental pressures had forced her group into unfamiliar territory with new food sources. The limestone formations surrounding her burial site preserved not just her bones, but footprints of several individuals who apparently remained near her final resting place for some time after her death. Perhaps the earliest evidence of grief or mourning behavior in the fossil record. In her suffering, we glimpse not just the physical vulnerabilities of our ancestors, but the emergence of uniquely human social responses to illness and death. Sometimes, death came from unexpected directions. The Tong child, an Africanus youngster who lived 2.8 million years ago, experienced a fate most modern humans would never think to fear, being hunted by a bird of prey. Although technically not a member of our genus Homo, this close relative's demise was so extraordinary, it demands inclusion in any discussion of prehistoric human deaths. The child's skull, discovered in a remote part of South Africa's Kalahari Desert, bears horrific injuries, puncture marks in the eye sockets, and deep scratches across the cranium. These patterns are identical to injuries seen in modern monkeys killed by eagles, suggesting this child was snatched by a massive raptor. Even more mysterious is that only the skull was found, isolated in a cave with no other bones, human or animal nearby. This led to an astonishing hypothesis. After killing and consuming the child, the predatory bird may have used the remaining skeleton to build a nest. Eventually, the skull became dislodged and tumbled into a nearby cave, where it would remain for millions of years until its discovery. This case fundamentally changed how we understand prehistoric survival, revealing that for early humans and our relatives, danger didn't just lurk on the ground or in the water. The sky itself was hostile territory, patrolled by predators, specifically adapted to hunt small primates. Next time you walk beneath circling birds, remember that for our smallest ancestors, looking up meant facing one of their deadliest predators. The revelation that our ancestors were hunted by birds of prey came relatively recently and revolutionized how we understand early human ecology. For decades after the Tong child's discovery in 1924, scientists focused exclusively on terrestrial predators as threats to early humans. It wasn't until the late 1990s that researchers noticed the distinctive damage pattern on the skull matched precisely with talon marks documented on modern monkey skulls from eagle kills. Further investigation revealed that the limestone cave where the skull was found contained hundreds of other bones from small mammals, all bearing similar talon and beak damage. This wasn't just an isolated incident. It was evidence of a systematic hunting pattern that had remained invisible to science for centuries. The predator responsible was likely a crowned hawkygill or an extinct relative, raptors, specialized in hunting primates that can weigh up to 20 pounds. These birds employ a specific killing technique. They pierce the skull through the eye orbits to reach the brain, explaining the distinctive puncture marks on the Tong child's skull. Advanced imaging technology recently revealed something even more chilling: microscopic fracture patterns indicating the child was still alive when the talons penetrated its eye sockets. The brain case shows evidence of having been partially emptied by a curved beak inserted through the foramen magnum, the hole at the skull's base. Perhaps most significantly, this discovery forced a complete reassessment of early human habitat preferences. Traditional theories suggested our ancestors moved into open savannas for safety from forest predators. But the Tong child reveals that open landscapes actually exposed them to aerial predators. This may explain why many early human species maintained a semi-arboreal lifestyle longer than previously thought. Trees offered refuge from both terrestrial and aerial threats. When you consider that the Tong child was approximately 3-4 years old at death, well past infancy, the implications for childcare practices among early humans become apparent. Constant vigilance wasn't just advisable, it was essential for survival. One of the most enigmatic human ancestors, Homo naledi, recently provided evidence of a death that defies easy explanation and hints at the emergence of symbolic behavior long before our species existed. Deep within South Africa's nearly inaccessible Rising Star cave system, researchers discovered over 1,500 fossil fragments representing at least 15 individuals of this previously unknown human species, dating to approximately 250,000 to 300,000 years ago. These small-brained, but remarkably human-like beings appear to have been deliberately placed in the chamber after death. The cave's extreme inaccessibility, requiring passage through a vertical shaft barely 7 inches wide in places, rules out accidental deaths or predator activity. No animal bones were found among the human remains, and the bones show no signs of water, transport, or trauma. The only plausible explanation is that other Homo naledi deliberately carried their dead through the treacherous passage and placed them in this remote chamber. What makes this case so extraordinary is that deliberate burial has traditionally been considered exclusive to large-brained humans, like Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. Homo naledi had a brain just 1/3 the size of ours, yet appears to have engaged in complex mortuary practices, requiring planning, cooperation, and possibly symbolic thinking. Were these individuals victims of disease, ritual sacrifice, natural deaths? The evidence remains ambiguous, but the careful placement of bodies suggests these deaths, whatever their cause, were followed by intentional, culturally meaningful treatment of the dead. This discovery forces us to reconsider when and why humans began to separate themselves from the natural cycle of life and death through ritual behavior. Perhaps the capacity for symbolic thinking isn't tied to brain size as once thought, but emerged far earlier in our evolutionary history than anyone imagined. In the dark chambers of Rising Star Cave, our understanding of what makes humans unique continues to evolve. The fate of the last Homo erectus may represent something even more profound, the only fossil evidence we have of an actual extinction event in progress. On the island of Java, researchers discovered over a dozen Homo erectus specimens dating to around 110,000 years ago, all adults, all mixed together at a single site. None showed signs of disease, violence, or age-related death. Instead, the sediments surrounding them told the real story. They had died together in a catastrophic flooding event. But this wasn't just any flood. Evidence suggests these individuals may have been victims of a lahar, a devastating mudflow triggered by volcanic activity that combines scalding water, rocks, and debris into a lethal slurry that can travel over 60 miles from its source. The remains were found tangled together in what appears to be a carcass jam. Bodies swept downstream until they became trapped at a river narrowing. While volcanic lahars weren't responsible for the extinction of Homo erectus as a species, changing habitats from woodland to rainforest played a larger role. This fossil assemblage presents a haunting snapshot of the last known members of one of humanity's most successful relatives, wiped out in a single catastrophic event. For nearly 2 million years, Homo erectus had thrived across Africa and Asia, but on this island, their final chapter was written in mud and water. A poetic, yet brutal end for a species that had outlived every other human lineage, except our own. The Ngondong site in Java represents the last stand of Homo erectus, a species that had survived longer than any other human lineage. New dating techniques have refined the age of these fossils to approximately 108,000 to 117,000 years ago, making them the last verified Erectus specimens anywhere on Earth. What makes this mass death particularly poignant is that these individuals had already defied incredible odds. Climate reconstruction shows that by this period, Java was undergoing rapid environmental transformation, as rainforests expanded, replacing the woodland savanna where Erectus had thrived for millennia. These individuals represented a population already under extreme ecological stress, perhaps the very last of their kind. Clinging to existence on a shrinking habitat island, taphonomic analysis, the study of how organisms decay and become fossilized, reveals something extraordinary about their final moments. The orientation of the bones, their remarkable preservation, and the sediment patterns all indicate they died within minutes of each other, not hours, not days. The volcanic debris mixed with the flood sediments contained microscopic glass particles, still hot enough to cause thermal alteration of the bones on contact, suggesting these humans encountered a lahar while it was still scorching hot. The pattern of deposition indicates they were likely a single social group, perhaps even a family unit, caught together in the same deadly flow. Their bones show no defensive fractures or evidence of struggle. Death would have been nearly instantaneous as the superheated, debris-filled flow engulfed them at speeds potentially exceeding 30 miles per hour. One female skeleton was found with her hand positioned as if still grasping something or someone that wasn't preserved. These weren't just the last Erectus specimens we've found. They may represent the actual terminal population of a species that had walked Earth for 2 million years, outlasting dozens of other human species before meeting their end in a geological instant. In their final moments, these last representatives of Homo erectus experienced something vanishingly rare in nature, a genuinely apocalyptic end. China's Zhaokudian Cave, home to the famous Peking man fossils, reveals perhaps the most viscerally disturbing prehistoric human deaths ever documented. Of the 28 Homo erectus specimens recovered from this site, a shocking 67% bear the unmistakable marks of hyena attacks. But these weren't ordinary hyenas. Pashikrokuta was the largest hyena species that ever lived, lion-sized predators weighing up to 330 pounds, with massive heads, housing bone-crushing jaws, powered by incredibly strong muscles. The evidence they left behind is nightmarish. Many Erectus specimens weren't just bitten, they were completely obliterated, smashed beyond recognition as the giant hyenas attempted to access nutritious bone marrow or simply consume the bones entirely. When these fossils were first discovered, The extensive damage led researchers to incorrectly conclude they were evidence of cannibalism among the human population. Only later, when comparing the patterns to known hyena damage on animal bones, did the horrifying truth emerge. This site wasn't primarily a human dwelling. It was a crocodile den where humans occasionally sought shelter, sometimes becoming prey themselves. Most chilling is what this tells us about humanity's place in the prehistoric food chain. Despite having tools and possibly fire, these early humans in China were not apex predators. The relative abundance of human bones showing hyena damage, coupled with the absence of hyena bones showing human tool marks, suggests a one-sided relationship. In prehistoric China, humans were prey. A humbling reminder that our species' dominance is a very recent development, not our natural state. The tragedy of Zhaokudian extends beyond individual deaths to reveal something even more disturbing about our evolutionary journey. Layer after layer of sediment within the cave tells a story spanning over 200,000 years, and in nearly every layer, the same pattern appears. Human remains bearing the distinctive damage patterns of crocodile. This wasn't a single unfortunate event but a predator-prey relationship that persisted across countless generations. Recent analysis using electron microscopy has revealed fine details of the predation process. Many skulls show a consistent pattern of damage starting at the base, indicating the hyenas typically attacked from behind, perhaps ambushing humans as they entered or exited the cave. Other bones show evidence of having been digested, passing completely through the hyena's digestive tract before being deposited in their feces within the cave. Perhaps most disturbing are the bones of juvenile humans, showing the distinctive scalloping pattern created when hyenas systematically consume soft tissue from limbs. Evidence these children were eaten flesh first, while their bones were still fresh. The cave stratigraphy reveals another chilling detail. The deepest, oldest layers contain fewer human remains with predator damage, while more recent layers show increasingly intensive hyena processing of human bodies. This suggests that over time, the relationship between humans and hyenas in this region grew more antagonistic, not less, a predatory arms race that humans appear to have been losing. Fire evidence within the cave is sporadic and inconsistent, suggesting these Erectus populations had not yet mastered regular fire production, a crucial technological limitation that may have left them vulnerable after dark. Some researchers now theorize that crocodile may have been a significant selective pressure driving human technological development in Asia. Every tool, innovation, every social adaptation that reduced predation risk would have provided immediate survival advantages. In this light, the shattered remains from Zhaokudian aren't just evidence of tragic deaths, they're evolutionary signposts, marking the brutal gauntlet through which humanity emerged. Even something as seemingly minor as a tooth infection could be a death sentence for prehistoric humans. The Turkana boy, a 1.6 million year old Homo erectus youth discovered in Kenya, died not from predator attack or natural disaster, but from what modern dentistry could easily prevent. This remarkably complete skeleton tells the story of a child who experienced a cascade of misfortune. As his milk teeth fell out around age 8 or 9, his permanent molars and premolars grew in awkwardly, colliding and damaging the surrounding tissues. This led to a severe abscess that never healed, eventually causing septicemia, blood poisoning from bacterial infection. Scientists believe the weakened child collapsed face first while crossing swampy terrain, too debilitated by infection to rise again, and died floating face down in shallow water. But the indignities continued after death. His body appears to have been trampled by animals, pressing him into the muddy swamp floor where fossilization began. Later, volcanic ash from a local eruption covered some of his remains, creating a tomb that would preserve his story for over 1 million years. Recent reanalysis of his spine revealed yet another burden, a severely herniated disc that would have severely limited his mobility. This child faced a double death sentence. If the mouth infection hadn't killed him, his spinal condition would have left him vulnerable to predators in a world where any physical disadvantage could be fatal. The Turkana boy stands as a stark reminder that before modern medicine, even minor health issues could, and did, kill our ancestors. Often during childhood, the Turkana boy's remains contain another surprise that fundamentally changed our understanding of early human growth patterns. Initial studies of his skeleton suggested he was 12 to 13 years old at death, based on modern human development rates. However, microanalysis of his tooth enamel, which forms in layers like tree rings, revealed he was actually only 8 to 9 years old, but already over 5'3" inches tall. This discovery revealed that Homo erectus children developed more like chimps than modern humans, with rapid physical growth, but potentially shorter childhood learning periods. This accelerated growth may represent an evolutionary adaptation to high mortality rates, growing quickly to reproductive age before predators, disease, or accidents could claim them. Statistical modeling suggests that in the Turkana boys' population, fewer than 40% of children survived to adulthood, with dental disease representing one of the leading causes of mortality. His dental abscess began where his deciduous baby canine was replaced by a permanent tooth, creating a pathway for bacteria to enter the jawbone. Microscopic examination reveals the infection had progressed to osteomyelitis, bone infection that would have caused excruciating pain and eventually allowed bacteria to enter his bloodstream. Experimental archaeology using thermal imaging techniques suggests his face would have been visibly swollen and radiating heat for weeks before death. Isotope analysis of different parts of his skeleton tells a story of progressive starvation as the infection worsened. He ate less, further weakening his body's ability to fight the spreading bacteria. His herniated disc shows signs of inflammatory response, suggesting it was an acute injury that occurred shortly before death, possibly from a fall, as his weakened condition worsened. Most poignant is that this child's remains were found completely isolated, with no evidence of other humans nearby when he died. Unlike other cases where we see evidence of care for the sick and injured, the Turkana boy appears to have died alone, perhaps separated from his group during migration, or left behind when he could no longer keep up. His solitary death represents both the harsh realities of prehistoric survival and a deeply personal tragedy that transcends time. These grim stories, written in fossilized bone, offer a window into the brutal reality our ancestors faced for millions of years. Murder, predation, accidental poisoning, aerial attacks, natural disasters, predator consumption, and untreated infection. A catalog of suffering that puts our modern concerns into sharp perspective. Yet there's something profoundly moving about these ancient deaths. They connect us directly to our evolutionary heritage, revealing not just how our ancestors died, but how they lived, constantly adapting to threats we can barely imagine today. These weren't just primitive versions of ourselves. They were fully realized humans, navigating a world far more dangerous than our own. And while we've conquered many of the threats that killed them, their stories remind us how recently we've risen to our current position of safety and dominance. So the next time you visit a natural history museum and see a human fossil behind glass, remember, you're not just looking at ancient anatomy, you're looking at a cold case, someone whose life and death helped shape the species we would become. The most important question isn't just how they died, but what their deaths tell us about our own astonishing survival against all odds. What other stories lie buried, waiting to be uncovered? And what would our ancient ancestors think of the world? We've built a world where their worst nightmares have been relegated to history. From these ancient tragedies emerges a profound truth about humanity itself. Our vulnerability shaped our greatest strengths. Every technological innovation, every social adaptation that defines modern humans can be traced back to survival pressures revealed in these fossil deaths. The murder at Cima de los Huesos led to complex social rules governing violence. Predator attacks drove the development of weapons, cooperative hunting, and eventually, domination of the food chain. Vitamin A poisoning taught careful observation of cause and effect, laying groundwork for empirical medicine. Aerial predation encouraged vigilance and environmental awareness. Natural disasters prompted recognition of geological warning signs and selection of safer habitats. Hyena confrontations accelerated tool development and fire mastery. Dental infections eventually led to specialized healing knowledge. Each death wasn't just an endpoint, but a selection pressure that sculpted our species' unique attributes. When viewed in this light, these ancient tragedies aren't just curiosities, they're the evolutionary forge that created humanity itself. And as we contemplate our future challenges from climate change to pandemic disease, perhaps our greatest resource isn't our technology, but the adaptability these ancient deaths helped inscribe in our very nature. The capacity to observe, innovate, cooperate, and overcome that allowed our ancestors to survive these prehistoric horrors remains our birthright and our hope. Their deaths weren't in vain. They were the price paid for our extraordinary journey. From prey to planetary dominance, we honor them not by looking away from their suffering, but by recognizing that in their bones lies the secret of our success, resilience in the face of seemingly impossible odds.